Good morning and a very warm welcome to you. Today is the 7th of March, and right before we get into anything else, I just want to wish you good health and peace of mind.
Absolutely. Good health to you all.
It really can be a rather chaotic world out there at the moment. So we are absolutely delighted to have you sit down, take a breath, and join us right here on the Military Chessboard channel.
It is a genuine pleasure to spend some time with you today.
We are joined today by our resident analyst, MC Morgan-Jones, for a proper look at some incredibly complex global events. The major headline flashing across every screen this morning is straightforward, but the implications are massive. Iran launches combined attack on Israel.
It is the headline defining the day, without a doubt.
Right. And we have been sifting through a very thick stack of sources today, everything from official military briefings to in-depth geopolitical analyses and reports straight from the ground. Our mission for this deep dive is to cut right through that noise.
Because there is a lot of noise out there right now.
Exactly. We are going to take our time, unpack the details, and understand this multi-front escalation involving Iran, Israel, the United States, and several neighboring nations. And to be crystal clear from the start, we are not here to take any sides.
Not at all. We just look at the board.
Spot on. We are simply going to look at the facts as they sit on the board today so you can understand exactly what is happening and how it might impact your day-to-day life. So I will start by asking you this, sitting at home. When multiple global superpowers start moving their most critical pieces at exactly the same time, how do we make sense of the board?
That is the exact challenge we really need to tackle today. And a very good morning to you as well. When you look at the board right now, the sheer volume of military movements, the absolute flurry of strikes and counterstrikes, it can feel completely overwhelming.
It really can.
But if we slow down, step back, and examine the logic behind each of these individual moves, the broader strategy really does begin to reveal itself. We are looking at a high-stakes series of actions and reactions, and they aren't just contained to the battlefield. They are directly bleeding into regional stability, international shipping, and global energy markets.
Okay, let's unpack this, starting with the immediate events that triggered this latest global alert. According to the overnight reports, Iran initiated a massive combined attack.
Yes, a highly coordinated offensive.
They used a swarm of UAVs, unmanned aerial vehicles, essentially highly advanced explosive drones alongside heavy ballistic missiles. The sources specifically point to the Khaibar-Sheikhan and the Khorramshahr-4 missiles. Now, I do not want to get bogged down in military jargon, but to put it simply, these are exceptionally heavy weapons.
Very heavy. We're talking about major strategic assets.
Right. We are talking about missiles carrying cluster warheads that weigh anywhere from 1 to 1.5 tons. I was reading the descriptions of these cluster warheads deploying, where they separate into dozens of glowing submunitions high up in the night sky. Why use that specific type of weaponry for this strike?
It is a calculated tactic designed specifically to overwhelm modern air defenses. You see, a standard missile gives a defense system, like the Iron Dome, a single large target to track and intercept.
Which those systems are very good at hitting.
Exactly. But a cluster warhead is designed to break apart in the upper atmosphere. It disperses dozens, sometimes hundreds, of smaller explosive devices over a wide geographical area. When those glowing objects were filmed separating in the night sky over central Tel Aviv, it was visual confirmation of a payload meant to saturate the radar.
To just overload the computers, essentially?
Precisely. It forces the defensive systems to instantly calculate and intercept multiple simultaneous threats. It is an attempt to find the mathematical breaking point of the defense shield.
And the targets themselves were highly significant. The reports show the crosshairs were squarely on central areas of Tel Aviv, as well as the immediate vicinity of Ben Gurion International Airport. But there's a very striking contrast here that we really need to highlight.
The casualty reports.
Right. On one hand, you have rescue teams, including the United Hatzalah organization, reporting massive explosions and significant fires breaking out in residential areas. But on the other hand, the initial casualty reports clearly state that no major casualties have been recorded from the specific massive strike. How do we reconcile a 1.5-ton cluster bomb attack with 0 major casualties?
What's fascinating here is how the physical reality of the strike is immediately overshadowed by the information war. The lack of massive casualties suggests that either the air defenses were incredibly effective or the civilian warning systems functioned exactly as intended.
People got to the shelters in time.
Exactly. But if you look at the messaging, psychological warfare is proving to be just as critical as the munitions. The Iranian Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps immediately went public. They claimed their missiles successfully pierced through 7 layers of air defense.
7 layers. That is a massive claim.
It is. And they specifically announced they had struck and devastated the Squadron 27 airbase, promising they had made their opponent taste hell.
But then we look at the response from the other side, and the narrative doesn't just fracture, it completely falls apart.
It really does.
Israeli sources, including the Times of Israel, countered that claim almost instantly. They stated that the Israeli Air Force does not even have a Squadron 27 in operation anymore. They pointed out that Air Force Base 27, which was located at Ben Gurion Airport, was actually closed down over a decade ago, back in 2010.
Yes.
If they are fighting over military bases that have been closed for a decade, it really shows this is a war of public relations, doesn't it?
Precisely. It is a perfect illustration of how both sides are fighting to control the perception of victory, both for their domestic audiences and the international community. One side claims a devastating pinpoint strike on a critical military facility, and the other side essentially says, you bombed an empty lot we abandoned years ago.
It is incredible.
The narrative itself is a weapon. It is deployed just as strategically as the UAVs. And that public relations battle bleeds directly into how the subsequent counteroffensive is being messaged.
Which is exactly where I want to go next. Let's look at the shifting momentum and the sheer scale of the retaliation led by the United States and Israel. The statistics released by the United States Central Command, often referred to as CENTCOM, are incredibly dramatic.
The drop in launch capabilities.
Yes. Admiral Brad Cooper reported that Iranian ballistic missile attacks dropped by an astonishing 90%, and their UAV drone attacks dropped by 83%, all within a single 24-hour window. I saw those numbers and thought, you do not just get a 90% drop-off by accident. What exactly did the United States military do to suppress that capability so fast?
That is the crucial question, because a drop-off that steep tells us something fundamental about Iran's offensive capabilities. They are highly centralized. To achieve that suppression, the United States launched an immense 72-hour military campaign.
They went heavily on the offensive.
They absolutely did not just play defense. United States forces engaged and sank 30 Iranian naval vessels in the region. Crucially, that included naval control ships specifically used for launching and guiding those unmanned aerial vehicles.
So you take out the control ship.
And the drone swarm essentially loses its brain. Furthermore, they struck roughly 200 targets deep inside Iranian territory.
And the sources detail that those targets weren't just random outposts. They hit ballistic missile launchers and the equivalent of Iran's space command infrastructure. The language coming out of Washington right now reflects a very aggressive posture.
Very aggressive.
The United States Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, came out to address concerns about the military's supply lines, and he did not mince words. He stated the United States has plenty of offensive and defensive weapons in reserve. He warned that the campaign will likely escalate and said they have, quote, only just begun to fight. We also saw Donald Trump issuing a stark warning that an even larger wave of United States attacks is still pending.
And while the United States is focusing heavily on those broader territorial targets, naval assets, and degrading the launch infrastructure, Israel is declaring a strategic shift of its own. They are moving into what they're officially calling a new phase of the conflict.
A new phase.
Yes. The Israeli military claims their recent strikes have successfully destroyed 80% of Iran's air defense systems and 60% of their missile launchers.
But hang on, I have to play devil's advocate here for a moment.
Please do.
If Israel claims they have wiped out 80% of Iran's air defenses and 60% of their launchers, how is Iran simultaneously projecting enough power to trigger alarms across the whole region? That is a staggering claim regarding the reduction of a sovereign nation's defensive capabilities.
It is a staggering claim, and it is one that military analysts are scrutinizing heavily today. The reality likely involves asymmetrical warfare. Even if the conventional heavy missile launchers are degraded by 60%, mobile drone units and proxy militias can still launch localized attacks that create massive disruption.
Right, they do not need the big silos for the smaller drones.
Exactly. But Israel is operating under the assumption that they have severely degraded Iran's conventional deterrence. That is why you are seeing the Israel Defense Forces making such bold moves right now. Commander Herzi Halevi has openly warned of unprecedented surprises waiting ahead.
And those surprises seem to include a massive expansion of operations on the ground. The reports show they are pushing deep into southern Lebanon. They are moving past the Litani River, which is a major geographical and political marker, with the stated objective of completely disarming the Hezbollah forces. For anyone not familiar with the geography there, why is crossing the Litani River such a massive escalation?
The Litani River is essentially the United Nations designated buffer zone in southern Lebanon. It has historically been the red line for border skirmishes. By moving ground troops past that river, it is no longer a localized exchange of rocket fire.
It changes the whole scope of the operation.
Completely. They're establishing new lines of military control and attempting to physically dismantle the deep infrastructure of a heavily armed allied force in a neighboring sovereign country. It perfectly illustrates how interconnected the region is. You touch one piece on the board, and it instantly triggers a massive conventional ground war next door.
Which brings us to the very real problem of this conflict bleeding across international borders. It is no longer contained to Israel, Iran, and Lebanon. The geographical footprint is expanding rapidly.
It is expanding into the Gulf.
Yes, we are seeing reports that Iran has allegedly struck the Ali al-Salem air base in Kuwait. There are also reports of attacks on a United States naval base and a refinery in Bahrain, as well as targets located in Abu Dhabi. It has escalated to the point where NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, has officially raised its ballistic missile defense systems across the board to a state of high alert.
When NATO raises its alert levels to maximum, the internal assessment of the threat has officially shifted from a regional skirmish to a potentially international crisis. The inclusion of Kuwait, Bahrain, and Abu Dhabi means the conflict is spilling right across the Arabian Peninsula. Every time a new border is crossed or a new nation's infrastructure is hit, it adds a completely new layer of diplomatic and military complexity. It draws new alliances into the fray.
And speaking of unexpected borders, we have to talk about the incident up in Azerbaijan. The reports state that a UAV drone flew in from the direction of the Iranian border and attacked the Nakhchivan International Airport. Another drone fell near a school in a neighboring village, which unfortunately resulted in injuries to 2 civilians.
A very tense situation.
Azerbaijan has been absolutely furious about this. They are officially blaming Iran, labeling it an outright act of terror, and demanding a formal apology.
This is where the diplomatic chess game gets incredibly intricate and, quite frankly, a bit murky. The Iranian ambassador, Jalali, stepped forward and completely denied any Iranian involvement whatsoever. He argued rather forcefully that Tehran simply has no strategic or logical reason to launch an attack on its neighbors in the Nakhchivan region right now.
So who does he say sent the drone?
Well, he floated a completely different theory. He suggested this might be a false flag operation. He theorized that Israel, or another third party, might have deliberately orchestrated the drone strike from near the border, specifically to drag Iran into a wider, multi-front war with its immediate neighbors.
It is a dizzying array of accusations, denials, and counterclaims, but I think it is incredibly important that amidst all of these strategic moves, the political posturing, and the military statistics, we ground this conversation in the human reality.
We absolutely must.
These are not just pieces on a board. According to impartial monitoring groups, the human toll has been severe. The reports indicate that over 1,200 people have been killed in Iran since this specific military campaign started. In Israel, at least 12 people have been killed from the Iranian retaliation strikes. And in Lebanon, the reports state that at least 72 people have been killed from the recent Israeli airstrikes.
It is a deeply sobering reminder. When analysts sit in comfortable studios and talk about tactical momentum or shifting borders, we are ultimately talking about human lives. We are talking about shattered infrastructure, displaced families, and entire communities being uprooted. Those numbers represent the tragic, tangible, and irreversible cost of geopolitical escalation, regardless of which flag is painted on the side of the missile.
That is very well said.
And the internal political pressure those casualties create within each of these nations only makes finding a peaceful resolution that much harder.
Here's where it gets really interesting, especially regarding how a conflict thousands of miles away might end up impacting you directly at home. The geopolitical analysts cited in our sources point to an overarching strategy that was allegedly developed by the late supreme leader of Iran, Ali Khamenei, before his death.
The economic pressure campaign.
Exactly. According to the reports, his master plan was always to deliberately pressure Western nations, not just through military force, but by weaponizing the global energy and financial markets.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it is a structural strategy designed to make the conflict simply too expensive for the rest of the world to sustain. And the absolute cornerstone of this plan relies entirely on the geography of the Middle East, specifically the Strait of Hormuz.
Right, the major choke point.
For anyone who might not have a map handy, the Strait of Hormuz is a remarkably narrow waterway located right between the Persian Gulf and the Gulf of Oman. It is, without exaggeration, the most critical maritime choke point in the world for energy transport. Approximately 20% of the entire world's supply of oil and liquefied natural gas passes through that tiny stretch of water every single day.
20% of the global supply. That is a massive portion of the energy that keeps the world's lights on and engines running.
Right.
And the data we are seeing coming out of that strait right now is alarming. Marine traffic through the waterway has dropped by an astonishing 90%. Global maritime insurers are completely pulling their war risk coverage for the region.
And as we know in the shipping industry, if the commercial insurers will not back your cargo, your ships simply do not leave the port.
Exactly. Ships do not move on just fuel, they move on insurance.
They do. And this is where the geopolitical maneuvering becomes almost ironic. We are seeing reports that China, which is the world's largest consumer of Gulf oil and traditionally an ally of Iran, is actively negotiating with Tehran to guarantee safe passage, specifically for its own vessels.
Now, think about the dynamic there. It is a bit of geopolitical headache for Iran. They want to shut down the strait to punish the West, but their biggest customer is knocking on the door asking for a VIP pass through the blockade.
You cannot exactly play the tough guy bouncer when your landlord wants to get into the club.
No, you cannot.
If that negotiation succeeds, it could heavily undermine Iran's own blockade strategy, because they would be allowing a massive volume of energy to flow freely anyway.
Meanwhile, the United States is stepping in with a very different, much more forceful approach. The United States has offered to provide heavy naval escorts and alternative state-backed insurance guarantees to essentially force the Strait of Hormuz open for commercial shipping. They are telling global shipping companies, look, if the commercial insurers are too spooked to back you, the United States military will physically protect you while you move your cargo.
Which sets up an incredibly dangerous flashpoint on the water. You have Iranian forces claiming total sovereign control of the strait and threatening vessels, and you have United States naval forces preparing to escort commercial tankers directly through those exact same waters. It is a textbook recipe for a direct ship-to-ship maritime confrontation.
And the economic reality of this standoff is already hitting the global markets, which means it is eventually going to hit you right at the local petrol pump. When maritime insurers get spooked, that risk premium goes straight into the price of your commute. We have already seen the price of Brent crude oil spike significantly, jumping from 65 United States dollars a barrel up to nearly 85 United States dollars a barrel in just the space of a month.
A massive jump.
Now, interestingly, the Russian analysts cited in the sources suggest that Moscow might actually be quietly benefiting from this chaos. They benefit economically because of the high oil prices, and they benefit strategically by stepping in to act as a regional mediator and organizing evacuation flights.
It is a classic example of how one nation's crisis becomes another nation's strategic opportunity. As the energy markets tighten and prices skyrocket, energy exporting nations outside the immediate blast radius see their revenues massively increase.
It plays right into their hands.
Furthermore, as the world order shifts, nations like Russia use this kind of instability to strengthen their own diplomatic ties and leverage within alternative blocs, like the Shanghai Cooperation Organization or the SCO.
Right.
The SCO is essentially an alternative Eurasian political and security bloc. And crises like this allow its leading members to present themselves as the stable mediators while the West is embroiled in conflict.
But looking at the core players actually fighting the war, it seems that finding any sort of resolution is a very, very long way off. The sources suggest there are simply no diplomatic off-ramps being seriously considered right now.
None at all.
The Iranian foreign minister, Abbas Araghchi, made it explicitly clear in recent statements. He declared that Iran will not propose any kind of ceasefire, they will absolutely not negotiate with the United States, and they are fully prepared for a full-on ground war if the situation demands it.
This raises an important question regarding the ultimate stakes of this conflict. When diplomatic channels are completely shut down, and both sides commit publicly to fighting until the bitter end, the risks multiply exponentially. We are no longer just looking at a regional border dispute. We are looking at a situation that could easily morph into a global crisis.
A truly global crisis.
The longer those shipping lanes are disrupted, the higher the probability of long-term energy shortages. And that leads directly to massive economic instability worldwide. If industrial production in Asia or Europe slows down because energy is simply too expensive to keep the factories running, the ripple effects will be felt in every single sector of the global economy.
So what does this all mean for you, tuning in from home? It means that right now, the Middle East is acting as a highly volatile chessboard. Every single move, whether it is a UAV drone strike in the dead of night, a naval deployment in the Persian Gulf, or a diplomatic denial at a press conference, directly impacts global security. It throws a massive spanner in the works for international shipping lanes. And ultimately, it impacts your wallet when you go to buy fuel or pay for groceries.
I will leave you with a final thought to ponder today. We have spent quite a bit of time discussing the immediate disruptions to the Strait of Hormuz and the spikes in oil prices. But imagine the long-term structural consequences of this week's events. If global superpowers are forced to permanently bypass traditional energy choke points because they are simply too dangerous to navigate, how will that permanently rewire global trade alliances, infrastructure investments, and the entire world economy over the next decade?
That is a fascinating point.
It is a fundamental shift in how the world does business, and it could outlast the current military conflict by generations.
That is certainly a profound thought to chew on as we watch these unprecedented events continue to unfold. Thank you so much for joining us today on the Military Chessboard channel. If you found this deep dive into the source material helpful in understanding the board, we would kindly ask you to hit the like button. Please jump into the comments below with your own perspectives on the situation. We genuinely value what you have to say and love reading your insights.
We really do.
And do make sure to subscribe to the Military Chessboard channel so you can stay fully informed as we continue to track these crucial developments. Thank you again for generously giving us your time today. Look after yourselves out there, and we promise to see you in the next program.